Maybe you worked on Wall Street, but what is that transferable skill set? Is it networking? Is it sales? That was my background. And that's how I got into franchise, my first franchise and now consulting. So I always tell people, think about the skill sets, not necessarily the actual experience.
I was a franchisee of a nutrition concept when I was 21, built up to 7 locations, lost it all, and rebuilt with a partner to 68 locations within the same system. In Michigan, 4 out of 5 team drivers will experience an accident within the first 3 years of getting their driver's license.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast, where you can escape the corporate trap through franchise ownership. Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the Franchise Guide.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, your franchise guide, the show where we help corporate executives experience time and financial freedom via franchising. Exciting show for you today. I have 2 of my friends that we've had on the show before. So this is second time round. Third time round, you get the SNL robe, Zach Beutler and Jen Wherrell. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a while since we connected, and wanted to talk today about Jungle Driving School. Really excited to learn more and find out a little bit more about the brand. But before we dive in, give the audiences, maybe if they haven't seen the previous episode, a little bit of background. We'll start with Zach and give us a little bit of background as to, how you got into franchising, and, we'll dive into the franchise here in a little bit.
Yeah, I got a really, unique story in franchising. I've sat at almost every side of the table on, franchisee, multi-unit franchisee, failed franchisee, rebuilt franchisee, franchisor, consultant, development. I was a franchisee of a nutrition concept when I was 21, built up to 7 locations, lost it all, and rebuilt with a partner to 68 locations within the same system. And going through that process, we've been around 40 million in revenue, at 200 employees. And so that was we did that for about a decade. That was a roller coaster ride, but we had to reinvent that model a lot. And that really allowed, I think, my personality to be flexible with the business model and look for new opportunities and always be ready to change. From there, I got into development, helped grow a bunch of brands, and then was a franchisor, helped co-found a portfolio company with 9 franchise concepts and 3,000 plus locations. And now here we are launching Jungle Driving School.
Awesome. Jen, your turn.
So I've been in franchising for 14 years. I have been on some of the sides. The only one I have been on is obviously the franchisee side, but I also grew a brand from scratch. A couple of things that I know Zach's taking from his history there, and I'm going to taking from my history when it comes to growth and the responsibility of the franchisor, really important to us. Spent a couple of years in finance and the funding side, which I really think brings a differentiator to Jungle, because having that awareness on our team and in-house is a big deal.
Absolutely. You have to have that understanding, and we're definitely going to touch on that topic here in a little bit. So what is Jungle Driving School? I guess we'll start there, and then I want to go into kind of the characteristics, how you came about it.
Oh yeah, Jungle Driving School is a driver's ed concept or graduated licensing program for teens, specifically on that teen experience. And it's a little bit of a unique space. When you look at the competitors, every company that we really went out and investigated has a really boring DMV vanilla feel. And I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I had really no ability to focus and was all over the place. And I'm pretty sure it's worse in today's world than it was before. And so it really tailors a unique experience to a teen. The story behind it is really what I think I got hooked, Giuseppe. I got introduced to the founder, Fred Westdale, and meeting him and learning about it. There was 2 partners, one of which, around 25 years ago, actually created the driver safety program for UPS. It was one of their lead accident investigators, was credited with lowering the accident rate around the country by 70%. And he retired, went to his neighbor, whose name was Fred Westdale, and he said, let's start a driving school together. And they took the state curriculum, that method that he put into place there, and they layered it with a jungle theme with buzzwords like butt sniffer and hyena drivers, and made it really a fun concept and experience for teenagers. And, it really hit me. There was 2 aha moments. I asked Fred, how'd you get your customers, Fred? Like, how'd you first start? And he leaned back and he's in the 70s. He said, no, Zach, we did a direct mail piece once. That's the only thing they'd ever done.
Wow.
And so every year you have this next class coming into the schools,
Right.
and they're asking, where did you go? And it's kind of like you're the known company. So they've got great residual revenue. And the second aha moment is I did a ride along with a student and their parent, and their student and their father with Fred. And that's where I got almost a little emotional. I was like, this is what my kids are going to go through.
Right.
What type of place would I want to send them to? Not just to get an insurance break, not just so that they can get their license, but to keep them safe as well.
Yeah, it's what happens. It's not just enough about parallel parking, but what happens if you start, depending on where you live, if you have ice or you're
Sure.
hydroplaning, what do you do? So almost kind of a built-in safety course, if that makes sense. Is that fair to say?
Well, it really is. And there's actually they did a study. So in Michigan, 4 out of 5 teen drivers will experience an accident within the first 3 years of getting their driver's license.
Wow.
Jungle did the same study on over 1,000 parents, and 1 out of 5 kids that went through their program had the same accident. So 1 out of 5 that went through this program versus 4 out of 5, which is the state average.
Mhm.
That's when we knew that we had really a superior curriculum than what kids were used to.
Oh, cool. And so this is a new franchise. Are there any franchisees? This is kind of starting from scratch.
Oh, we got 1 location up and running. A second one
Okay.
that'll be up here in Omaha in about 45 days, and then a third one in Indianapolis. That'll be really the beginning, and then we're just launching this week, so we're right in the beginning of it.
So what made you, you've been on, and you both have been in different sides of franchising. So what were the standouts? Obviously you've been involved with other brands, multiple brands. What were the standouts? You've kind of, you've learned from mistakes. You have a ton of experience. So what really stood out about the brand? Maybe we'll talk about some key characteristics. I'll let either one. Yeah. Either one of you.
I'll just say for me, it was really about the mission,
Right.
for saving teen lives. As a mom of teens who in the state of Florida, it's not a requirement, but in 37 states across the country, it is a requirement that you have to go to a place like this. And even though it isn't in Florida, I still did it with my kids because you start realizing it's not just, you kind of hit on it earlier, it's not just about your child driving, it's about everyone else around you driving. And that's a really important thing to me that they're teaching at Jungle is, like he said, butt sniffers, obviously you can figure out what that is, right? People at tailgate, hyenas, and these things are funny, but the kids are laughing about it. They're learning about it in the classroom, and then they're going out and having to call that out as they're driving. So they, they're automatically remembering those things when they're out on the road and keeping them safe and protected, as we all want to do as parents. Certainly when you're in a vehicle and on the roads is, just, it touched my heart in that way, I think, for me.
Well, yeah, I think there's 2 sides to that answer. What I experienced initially was completely entrepreneurial and business. I looked at it and go, there's nothing in this space that I feel was geared towards teenagers that created a really unique experience. That had me interested. I've had a big concern on customer acquisition for a few years now, where I think the digital landscape is broken and it's really hard to digitally advertise out there across almost all industries. And so with this concept, you really know where your kids are at when they're there.
Right.
And you have a new crop coming in every year. So there's things that you can strategically do to get in front of those customers and build those relationships. I like that versus having to go door to door or, just blanket a market. You can be very sniper-like with how you approach the customer acquisition. The residualness I thought was interesting when I heard that the only campaign that they've done in advertising was 1 direct mail piece. That's where I was like, okay, there's
You're onto
something
something.
recession proof. I think that you would wait to get your house roofed before you make sure that your kid was safe. So there's a mandated from a state standpoint, even in like Nebraska and Florida where there's not a mandate, they still either have to go through a program like this
Right.
or do documented driving hours with a legal guardian. And so it's, I think parents would rather outsource that to a professional than do it themselves. So that's the first part. I went from a business checking the boxes going, customer acquisition can be that, and profitable, residual, unique experience, clearly can differentiate yourself from the competition. When I did the ride along though, I had not thought and this is me being transparent. The mission obviously, was important, but it was purely business.
Right.
When I did the ride along, that's when it became emotional for me. And, my kids are young and this is what they're going to go through. There's not many businesses that you can start where you can make money, build something that's important to the community, and also do something that's as unique as saving kids' lives. I mean, they're really rewarding. So that did not hit me until I did that ride along. And that's when it was like completely flipped my mind in a different direction.
And I think that ride along, it's totally different if they kind of explained or showed you a video to actually experience it firsthand. I know for myself, I have 2 teenagers. My son's 17, my daughter will be 15. So yeah, we went, we're in New Jersey. So it was one of the states where you had to mandate it to have a driving school. We didn't know where to go. We just contacted the school because everyone's, and naturally every year you have, I forget how many kids in each class, 200-300 kids in each class. So obviously they're all going to be in need of this service as well. If I can add one thing down the road, if you can add after they get their licenses, I need to get one of these brakes on the passenger side that are easy to install, because I'm doing the air brake constantly whenever someone else is driving. So if that could be installed easily, that would be awesome. But yeah, I like that. Who would you say? So this is a brand that obviously high in demand. Who would be the right fit? So from someone maybe gets the mission, really hits home, but who are you looking for? What are the skill sets, the characteristics of that franchise avatar that you're looking for?
There's some deal breakers with this brand. I've always been an experienced person. I always think the experience that you provide is what can really set you apart. I think that's where I had a lot of success on the franchise development side. And now being able to implement that both on the franchise development as well as operations, we love to differentiate ourselves. But I think when you look at that experience, you have to have someone at the top that can culturally affect the organization down. And so the franchisee is going to have to be outgoing. Is going to have that, just they're likable, they're connected in their community, preferably have a 14 to 16, 17-year-old kid or teenagers that have recently went through, are going to have to go through the program because then they have a built-in network.
Right.
But I think it's a community type person that's got the connections that people like, and that when they look to go hire people like themselves, they can replicate that experience down the totem pole.
No, you hit nail on the head there. The outgoing personality that is, a pillar of the community, somebody that agrees with the mission too, I think is important, that are looking for things that they want to do that are mission based isn't the only thing that I can keep out of there. So.
And the adult one's also important. I don't think the analytical chief technology officer that wants to be in the office all day is probably not the right fit for this type of brand. And we really want people to focus on a superior experience that the teens go through.
Right. And that's really important. And that's why I invite different franchise companies, brick and mortar, food, non-food, service-based, the experience. We want not the experience, the knowledge, kind of to really explain to people, what does the initial setup look like? Who does well in certain industries or with certain brands? And I do this, and I like to help people kind of compare and contrast just to see, hey, do I see myself doing this? Is this a brand that may or may not be a good fit? Specifically for what I'm looking to accomplish based off the skill sets, not necessarily the experience that you had. Maybe you worked on Wall Street, but what is that transferable skill set? Is it networking? Is it sales? That was my background. And that's how I got into my first franchise and now consulting. So I always tell people, think about the skill sets, not necessarily the actual experience. When it comes to, the investment and funding, Jen, obviously this is where we met in the past on the funding side. So can you talk a little bit about, maybe some ways of funding this type of business? Maybe top two, 3 ways of funding this?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, the obvious one is that the SBA loan. Also, we're going to be looking into not necessarily a fleet loan for the vehicles, but going to the local, I don't know, Zach, you could probably explain the fleet program.
I think there's a couple options on the, when you look at the vehicles. Our goal is to hopefully they ramp up as quickly as possible. We're flexible on the actual type of vehicle they're going to be driving. So a lot of the times the dealership is going to have the lowest interest rate and best financing option on the vehicle itself. I think it's going to be the typical jobs rollover SBA type of funding opportunity. Yeah. And then for initial growth, I like this concept for the future growth because it can be done through the dealership financing. It's on a $250,000 second vehicle they had to get. It's a $20,000 to $30,000.
Right. Sounds good. And that's right. I actually, we talk about SBA all the time, but I forgot about the fleet loan. So that's a very good point. What else about the brand that really stands out, or someone's taking a look? Obviously, when someone's looking at franchise, they're looking at different brands. And we talked about the mission. We talked about kind of, who the ideal candidate would be. Anything else that really stands out that differentiates the brand compared to maybe some other businesses on the service side?
Yeah, the customer acquisition is always, I think that's an important part for a lot of candidates is, how can get customers? And when you look at emerging franchise brands, the reason that you're able to find them is because they have territory that is open.
Right.
Look at like a Jimmy John's, a McDonald's, they're sold out for a reason, but they have systems and processes. But the more important is they have national awareness that are feeding customers. And so, when you look at different brands, how do you go find those customers and how do you manage that activity and effort that we just talked about earlier? I like the idea that there's a place that you can go, you can find out where they're at. There's a strategy that we can put in place to go and get in front of those types of customers. That I liked. You know where your customers are at, when they're going to be there, and you go then do your pitch versus having to sit back and wait and hope they come to you.
Right.
I like that mentality a lot better. I think when you look at the competitors, I mean, everybody that I've talked to recently across multiple states that have sent their kids to a graduate license program like this, there was a waiting line. They had to wait several months before their kid could get in. So that local business is typically a vanilla shell DMV type of feel. And so, we're really trying to create a superior experience. We have arcade games in the lobby. We have the Rainforest Cafe type of theme. And so we're really trying to create an experience that's just better than the competition. And that we can capture market share at a pretty fast pace.
I like that. And that's a concern people have, two things. Client acquisition. I've never done marketing before. I worked for a large corporation just like I did, and it was all done for you. Leads were essentially handed to us to close. So turnkey marketing, but ways to manage it. We talked prior to hitting the record button, and maybe I should start recording as soon as we all joined, because we missed out on that. But what do we do to bring on leads, to attract new clients to the business? That's crucial. And it's an ever evolving thing. I know when I first started with SEO, and the algorithms are constantly changing. So really having that support as to exactly, how do I go about this? And then what do you do over and beyond? So yes, we handle the digital, but what else can be done? As you mentioned, events. So, my wife was president of the PTO for 3 years. I think that was the max. And then you had to change it to a different position. So, or PTA, PTO, and depending on the school, they call it different, but what should we be doing? Should we be sponsoring events? Should we be working with the schools? How early, what grade? And I think having that roadmap, and then you just really just go after it, right? Just kind of have that blueprint of exactly what you should be doing. So am I missing anything there? But I know that's crucial.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Getting into the schools, and we have specific parts of our marketing that have us intertwined with the school systems, and not just hey, this is what we do, but hey, we're here to help and be a part of the school's fabric, which is just another component to what we're doing with Jungle.
Yeah. In my experience in marketing, too many franchise brands try to hit home runs. And it's not necessarily about home runs. It's about having small wins, and, getting to a certain number of Google reviews is important. Having enough followers and on social platforms just to be able to capture attention with updates is important. And then how do you manage those effort and activities for like a GM, for an example? Like, how do you know they're actually going and doing those things? There's more than, you have to do more than one thing and have more than one campaign and strategy to be able to win the game. And so we're attacking it from still an old school. One of them is an old school targeted mailer to households that have a 14 to 16-year-old kid. That's a list that's fairly cheap that you can attack at the right time with a great call to urgency or an offer. That's still really effective. And then a budget based on each school within a certain amount of rate, a certain number of the school. And we can really be strategic about when they go, what they say, what they offer at certain times.
Yeah, direct. I read somewhere direct mail is dead, and I call BS on that. Direct mail is not dead. It's how you go about it. Just like cold email is dead. No, it's how you go about it. And I love that approach. I know for myself, I do handwritten notes, and who gets a handwritten note anymore? You probably can't read my handwriting, but it's a handwritten note. So
it's what's in the packet.
We just like, they're like, wow, I got something handwritten sent to me. I'm kind of forced. You have to, just out of curiosity. I got to open this thing. So I love that. We have a lot of listeners. We did a poll kind of, figuring out who is listening to this show. Not everyone responds, obviously, but just to get a good feel. And it's a lot of people that are in transition. They're looking to eventually own their own business. Some have made the leap, whether it's a franchise or not. And some are really corporate execs. I would say 3/4 of the audience are corporate execs looking to figure out the next steps, what that business is. So what advice, person just starting out, looking to, just they know the corporate life isn't for them, what advice would you guys give someone in that transition? A couple pieces of advice, and both of you can tackle this one, but what's kind of a good starting point? You've done this before. What good, piece of advice would you give to that person?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind. I'll go first. I think the number one piece of advice is understanding that, but when you're looking to jump into franchising, you're really looking to find, a business in a box with a proven system. And it's not about rewriting, your own company or coming up with your own ideas. That's why you're doing this. So kind of being relaxed in the fact that you are going to be given something that you just have to implement. And I think a lot of times when people are thinking about entrepreneurship, they are thinking, oh, I have to come up with all these ideas and it's going to be really difficult. And how will I transition from the JOB into the entrepreneurial world? And when you're looking at a system like Jungle, that's the comfortability. The part that you're going to not have to worry about is that here it is. Here's how you work it. And I think it takes that fear away a lot. So that would be my advice to listen to the business.
Beat that one, Zach.
Yeah. Let's see. Where have I made this mistake?
How much time do you have?
That's another show. That's the next show. No, I'm kidding.
That's a series. Probably. I have a couple points, I think. So the first is a quote by Peter Drucker: "What gets measured gets managed." And so having an operating system of how you're going to manage the business is really overlooked. I talked to I don't know how many local formal calls I have had. There was a gentleman in Kansas City that I remember I talked to for a brand. And when I got on there, they weren't having a weekly meeting. They had no idea what their numbers were. They hadn't logged into their social media. They hadn't even logged into any of the referral partnership stuff that we'd had built for that brand. And we had some of those things in place. And what I recognized is not only do we have to have them in place, but we really got to build that into the culture. And so we bought EOS or Traction is that you can read the book, but you really have to start that process and stay with it. So that way you have the right people in the right seats on the bus. You're managing and monitoring the KPIs that move the business forward. That is something that's really missed. And that applies for any business out there is what operating system are you using to be effective, to move the needle in how you're performing? I think that's a big one. The second, it's going to be harder than you think, but more rewarding than you think. And so sales is what solves the problem most of the time.
Sure.
If you're not doing well, typically the first thing they go to is, well, how many leads or what's our revenue? And so focusing on driving revenue allows you to have the luxury of not having to be operationally excellent. Being operationally excellent and having no revenue doesn't really matter. And so you have to be focused on driving sales. And I don't care what business it is, you are going to have to be a marketer and salesman. That's just a part of being an entrepreneur. And no matter how much the franchisor says they have it dialed in, that's still a part of your business. That'll be a part of your DNA. You have to be able to get out there and live your brand and constantly be evolving to the changing times. And I think the third is the people are by far the most important. And people are going to make mistakes, but making sure that, again, people are helping you build that business and have a clear roadmap of what they're supposed to be doing and have some freedom to be up there, help get some molds.
Right. Love that. No, that's awesome. It's funny when you mentioned sales. We just interviewed David Reciano from Source Soap. He was a Shark Tank deal here in my local town a couple of months ago. Did a deal with Mark Cuban, and that was part of the conversation. Is sales cures it all. Sales will increase. We can start figuring out where the breaks are and things like that. But ultimately, we want to get the product into the community. We want people using it. We want these ambassadors, these people kind of promoting it. And that was part of the interview, which was, so it's funny you mentioned that. We just had this conversation. And for anyone listening in, you had mentioned EOS. So that's the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And the book is Traction by Gino Wickman. It's a book we talk about quite a bit. It's funny. I've, been an entrepreneur for 25 years, went to grad school, did all that kind of stuff. And it's like, that book should be taught in school. It should almost replace a business class, because there really isn't an operating system, as we talked about. It's kind of like, all right, I need to do marketing. I need to do certain things, but how do you follow up? What are the KPIs? And then figuring out, okay, I have to track this on Fridays, but I'm meeting with my manager right afterwards, once a week, to review everything in person. And I think that's the missing piece. It's kind of like spokes of a wheel. They all have to be balanced, or you're not going anywhere on that bike. So it's really figuring out, okay, employees and finances and things like that.
I got one to add for you, because you just brought this to just talk about money. It's I call it "Don't Pee in the Pool."
Okay.
Don't pee in the pool. So, one of the best conferences I've ever been to, Giuseppe, was the Customer Service Summit by John DeJulius. So, John, if you hear this, you should come on this podcast. But
Yeah.
So he tells a story, and he's a business owner. He tells a story about him and his kids went to Disney, and his kid was 5 or 6, and had to go to the bathroom. And we'll just pee in the pool. Bath in the pool. Also, the kid gets out of the pool, pulls down his pants, and pees into the pool. And so the lesson is, did he do what I told him to?
Right.
And the answer is, well, he did. And so I think even as a franchisor, a business owner, are you clearly giving the expectations of what the desired outcome is and how to do that? And so don't pee in the pool is something we always talked about is, are you peeing in the pool right now? Or are you saying, go do this, I did it, and that's not what you wanted? And so as business owners, I think sometimes we have in our heads how we want things to be done.
Right.
You don't clearly articulate what you're expecting or how to do those things. Well, they're not going to be what you're not going to get the outcome you desire. Don't pee in the pool.
I was going to add something that was not what I was expecting. Is that, it's another unique, I think, with jungle driving is our team. Internally, we have really, part of the reason why I'm here is because of the team that Zach has created. And, if I'm going to leave what I was leaving, which, I really enjoyed what I was doing, had a great team there. It had to be for something special. And every person on our team, when you mentioned about EOS, it reminds me that I don't have to worry because I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And not only that, I know everyone else on the team is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we are solidifying that every week. And we're all coming together to push the boulder up the hill. And I think that's missing in a lot of franchise systems is the care to be on one mission, not only for our franchisees, but for us internally to be the best at what we're doing. And it's very rare. And we definitely have that here.
Love that. Yeah, the culture is big, and feedback. Everyone has to be on the same page. Ask for, give us your feedback. Just because we get feedback from the franchisee doesn't mean you're going to completely change or take every piece of feedback, but at least incorporate that. Maybe some additional trainings, maybe some follow-ups, maybe more of an in-person training, which is something we talked about earlier with Brand SprayNet, where they actually say, okay, you learn all this great stuff, have at it. Now it's like, all right, let's actually come out with you and train you right on the job site. Let's do some work together. Let's generate some revenue together. And I think those are the differentiators, because you get overwhelmed. It's like going to a Tony Robbins seminar, you're getting pumped up, on a Sunday it's over, Monday you're like, all right, what the hell do I even do now? So I like that. I like that approach. I think that's the best approach. Some of the, the big ideas out there were developed from franchisees. The fillet of fish I just found out from McDonald's, the $5 foot long, amongst others. So I really
the Big Mac.
The Big Mac too was the. Oh no, I didn't know that. I didn't know about the Big Mac. The fillet of fish I just found out. So awesome. What's a fun fact? I'll let you. We'll conclude the show with fun fact. Keep it clean, but a fun fact for each of you. Zach pees in the pool. No, I'm just kidding.
I have I'll say a fun fact about you, and you can say a fun fact about me. No, I'm
Oh
just
boy.
Yeah, a fun fact about me is that I grew up riding horses, and oftentimes they would get out and I would just have to be, running around our whole town barefoot, trying to find a piece of yarn or something to throw over the horse's back. So I don't look like a redneck, do I?
I live on a cattle ranch, and we raise Angus cattle, sell beef, and cattle genetics. And if I could do anything, I'd be a broke cowboy all day.
The hat. What's Beutler beef?
Yeah, Beutler beef. We got an e-commerce site where we sell our beef across the country, and launching a new division with Angus genetics here shortly. So It's an exciting time. And, I think entrepreneurship and business ownership, Giuseppe, is important when it comes to what do people really want. I think one of those things is the freedom to do what they want to do, when they want to do it. And that's what we all strive for. And so that's what we're all here to do.
And have fun doing it. It's important.
And
I agree with that. When people say I'm getting into this just to make more money, I'm like, there's got to be something else. So I always share, I became an entrepreneur never to miss a soccer game or a Girl Scout event, and even became a coach. Now, I kind of got phased out of the coach as the kids went to high school and they're at a much higher division, but I can say I've never missed a game. I missed maybe the first few minutes of a game if it was on a call, but never missed a game. So I think, when people take a step back as to what's really important to them, they're like, oh yeah, I can actually say the things like, I want to be home more often. I want to, maybe be able to work from home, have the freedom to go into the office or stay home. So you have options. And if you reverse engineer it and figure out what you want, that's a great starting point, as we were talking about earlier. Guys, I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working together. I'm sure we'll have more questions. And as the brand evolves, we like to bring everyone back on the show. So thanks again for your time. We're going to put everything in the show notes. So if there's anything that we didn't discuss, or a new video or promotion or updates or anything like that, let us know. And we can include that in the blog and show notes before we launch a show early in April. So thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
buddy, love what you do.
Awesome. All right, bear with me. We're going to stop.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.